The waitress was having the worst morning when she tripped and spilled hot coffee all over a stranger in an expensive suit. The cafe went silent as bodyguards stepped forward. She'd just drenched the most dangerous mafia boss in the city. What she didn't know was that he'd been waiting his whole life for someone brave enough to touch him, and now he'd never let her go. Mia's hands shook as she balanced the tray of steaming lattes, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Grind Coffee, she could see him, Jake, walking toward the entrance with her. His new fiancée. The woman was everything Mia wasn't. Polished, confident, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Mia's monthly rent. Breathe, she told herself. Just breathe. But breathing felt impossible when Jake's laugh echoed through the cafe's morning bustle, the same laugh that used to make her stomach flutter. Now it twisted like a knife. 6 months. It had been 6 months since he'd told her she wasn't ambitious enough for his law firm lifestyle, since he'd packed his things and left her scrambling to cover rent on their shared apartment. The cafe door chimed as they entered, Jake's hand possessively placed on the small of his fiancée's back. Mia ducked her head, praying they wouldn't notice her, wouldn't choose to sit in her section. But luck had never been her friend. Mia? Jake's voice cut through the coffee shop chatter like a blade. Mia, is that you?
No, no, no.
Panic rushed through her veins like ice water. Her fingers trembled against the ceramic handles of the mugs. She forced herself to turn, plastering on the fake smile she'd perfected during countless shifts dealing with difficult customers. Oh, hi Jake. Her voice sounded strangled even to her own ears. Jake's fiancée, what was her name? Sarah? Stephanie. Studied Mia with the kind of calculating look women gave their competition. Her ring caught the morning light, a diamond so large it seemed to mock every dream Mia had ever dared to have. You look, Jake paused, his eyes taking in her coffee-stained apron and tired face. Well, liar. Mia knew exactly how she looked. Dark circles under her eyes from working double shifts, hair pulled back in a messy bun because she'd overslept again, the kind of exhausted that no amount of concealer could hide. Actually, the fiancée spoke up, her voice sugary sweet. We'll take that table by the window. I assume you're our waitress. The dismissal in her tone made Mia's cheeks burn. She nodded mutely, turning away before either of them could see the tears threatening to spill. The tray in her hands felt heavier now, her legs unsteady as she navigated through the crowded cafe. Just deliver these drinks, she thought desperately. Then you can hide in the back room and cry like the pathetic mess you are. But as she rounded the corner near table 12, her eyes still blurry with unshed tears, she didn't see the man rising from his seat. Didn't notice the expensive Italian leather shoes or the way conversations seemed to quiet in his presence. All she registered was a wall of solid muscle and the sickening sensation of hot coffee exploding across expensive fabric. Time stopped. The cafe fell into a silence, so complete that Mia could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She looked up, and up, into the darkest eyes she'd ever seen. The man towered over her, easily 6'3", with jet-black hair and a face that belonged in a Renaissance sculpture. But it wasn't his devastating good looks that made her blood turn to ice. It was the way everyone in the cafe had frozen like prey animals sensing a predator. Coffee dripped from his charcoal suit, a suit that probably cost more than her car. The liquid had splashed across his crisp white shirt, staining it brown. But the man didn't move.
Didn't speak.
He just stared at her with those midnight eyes while 4 men in identical black suits stepped forward like synchronized shadows. Sir, one of them spoke, his voice rough as gravel. Want us to handle this? The way he said handle made Mia's stomach drop. She opened her mouth to apologize, to beg, to do anything that might keep these scary men from doing whatever they were planning, but no sound came out. The stranger raised one hand, a simple gesture that froze his men in place, and slowly began brushing coffee from his jacket. His movements were deliberate, controlled, like a cat deciding whether to play with its prey before the kill. Then he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was sharp and dangerous, and made Mia think of sharks circling in dark water. "No one touches me and lives," he said, his voice low and smooth as aged whiskey. The words carried across the silent cafe, like a death sentence. "Except you." A whisper rippled through the coffee shop, barely audible, but filled with terror. "Dante Russo." Mia's knees nearly buckled. Even she knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name, usually whispered behind closed doors or printed in newspaper headlines about unsolved murders and missing persons. Dante Russo, heir to the most feared crime family on the East Coast, a man who could make people disappear with a phone call. And she'd just dumped an entire latte on him. Dante stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark that made her dizzy. His eyes never left her face, studying her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. "What's your name?" he asked. "And Mia," the word escaped, as barely a whisper. "Mia," he repeated it like he was tasting wine, rolling it around on his tongue. Pretty name for a pretty girl who just ruined a $5,000 suit. $5,000. Mia's entire world tilted. She made that much in 2 months if she was lucky. "I'm so sorry," she finally managed, her voice cracking. "I can pay for the cleaning, Can you?" His head tilted slightly, predatory amusement dancing in his dark eyes. "Do you have $5,000, Mia?" The question hung in the air like a noose. They both knew the answer. Around them, the cafe remained frozen, customers and staff alike too terrified to move. In the corner, Mia could see Jake and his fiancée huddled together, Jake's face pale as parchment. For a moment, she felt a twisted satisfaction at his obvious fear. Dante reached into his jacket, a movement that made his bodyguards tense, and pulled out a pristine white handkerchief. Instead of using it himself, he held it out to her. "Clean yourself up," he said softly. "You've got coffee on your cheek." Mia's hand shook as she took the cloth, their fingers brushing for just an instant. His skin was surprisingly warm, surprisingly gentle. She dabbed at her face, wondering if this was some kind of cruel game before he destroyed her life. "Better," Dante's smile widened, showing perfect white teeth. "Now, about my suit." "Please," Mia whispered. "I'll do anything. Just don't." "Don't what?" He leaned in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "I haven't said what I want yet." The promise in his voice made her shiver. This wasn't over. Whatever game he was playing, whatever punishment he had planned, this was only the beginning. Dante straightened, giving her one last long look that seemed to strip away all her defenses. "I'll be seeing you soon, Mia," he said, turning toward the door. His men fell into formation around him, like a dark honor guard. Very soon, as the cafe door closed behind them, normal sounds slowly returned, whispered conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of cups. But Mia remained frozen in place, Dante's handkerchief still clutched in her trembling hand. She had no idea that her life had just changed forever. That the most dangerous man in the city had just decided she belonged to him. And that tomorrow he would return to claim what he considered his. Mia barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dante Russo's predatory smile and heard his promise echoing in her mind. "I'll be seeing you soon." She tossed and turned until dawn, jumping at every sound outside her cramped studio apartment. Footsteps in the hallway, a car door slamming, the neighbor's cat knocking over a trash can. By morning, she'd almost convinced herself it was just her imagination running wild. Men like Dante Russo didn't waste time on coffee shop waitresses. He probably had already forgotten about her, moved on to more important criminal business. That delusion lasted exactly 12 minutes into her shift. Mia was refilling the sugar dispensers when the cafe door chimed. She looked up from her task and felt her blood turn to ice. Dante Russo stood in the doorway like a dark omen, his imposing frame silhouetted against the morning sunlight. Today he wore a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, perfectly tailored to his muscular build. The bustling coffee shop fell into that same unnatural quiet from yesterday. Conversations died mid-sentence. The barista, Tommy, nearly dropped the espresso cup he was cleaning. Even the background jazz music seemed to lower in volume. Dante's eyes found hers immediately, as if he'd known exactly where she would be. That predatory smile spread across his face, the one that made her think of wolves circling sheep. This can't be happening. He moved through the cafe with fluid grace, customers unconsciously stepping aside to clear his path. Without a word, he selected a table in the far corner, in her section, of course, and settled into the chair with his back to the wall, a position where he could see everyone and everything. Mia's hands trembled as she finished with the sugar dispenser. Around her, she could hear the whispered conversations starting up again. Is that really? Dante Russo, holy shit. Heard he killed a man with his bare hands. What's he doing here? Her manager, Carol, appeared at her elbow like a nervous ghost. Mia, she whispered urgently. That's him, isn't it? From yesterday? Mia nodded mutely. Jesus Christ, Carol's face had gone pale. You need to wait on him. Whatever he wants, just give it to him, okay? No questions, no attitude. I can't afford to have the Russo family angry at this place. So, even Carol knew who he was.
Of course she did.
Everyone in the city knew the Russo name, whispered it with the same reverence reserved for natural disasters and terminal illnesses. Mia grabbed her order pad with shaking hands and forced her feet to move toward his table. Each step felt like walking to her execution. Dante watched her approach with those dark, calculating eyes, his fingers steepled in front of him like he was conducting some kind of interview. Good morning, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Mia, he said her name like he was savoring it. You look tired. Didn't sleep well? The fact that he could read her so easily made her skin crawl. What can I get you? Coffee. Black. And he paused, his gaze traveling slowly over her face. Your attention. My attention? I want you to serve me personally. No one else touches my table, my food, my drinks. Just you. His tone was conversational, but there was steel underneath.
This wasn't a request.
Mia nodded quickly. Of course. I'll get your coffee right away. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Mia? She looked back, dreading whatever was coming next. I'll be here every day from now on. Same table, same time. I hope that won't be a problem. Every day? Panic clawed at her throat.
No, sir.
No problem at all. His smile widened. Good girl. The next 3 hours were the longest of Mia's life. Dante sat at his corner table like a spider in his web, ordering nothing but black coffee and watching her every move. When she delivered his first cup, he left a $100 tip on a $3 order. When she brought the second refill, he left another $100. By the third refill, her coworkers were staring openly. Mia, whispered Jessica, the other morning waitress, what the hell is going on? That guy has tipped you more today than I make in a week.
I don't know, Mia lied.
She knew exactly what was happening. Dante was marking his territory, making sure everyone understood that she was under his protection, or his ownership. The money wasn't a tip, it was a chain. Around 11 o'clock, a group of college students tried to sit at the table next to Dante's. They lasted exactly 30 seconds before his cold stare sent them scurrying to the other side of the cafe. A businessman in an expensive suit made the same mistake an hour later, and Dante didn't even need to look at him. Just a slight shift in his posture was enough to make the man grab his briefcase and flee. By noon, that entire corner of the cafe had become a dead zone that no one dared to enter except Mia. The worst part was how he never stopped watching her. Even when she was across the room taking other customers' orders, she could feel his eyes on her like a physical weight. When she bent to clean a table, when she reached for something on a high shelf, when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, he saw everything. Her other customers began to notice too. A regular customer, Mrs. Patterson, leaned in as Mia refilled her coffee cup. Honey, she whispered, That man in the corner hasn't taken his eyes off you all morning. Should I call someone? No, Mia said quickly, then forced her voice to soften. No, it's fine. He's just a customer. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Finally, as her shift neared its end, Mia gathered every ounce of courage she possessed and approached his table one last time. Sir, she said quietly, I need to ask you something. I'm listening. Could you maybe not come here anymore? You're making the other customers uncomfortable and… The words died in her throat as Dante's expression shifted. The casual amusement vanished, replaced by something much darker and more dangerous. He leaned back in his chair, his head tilted slightly, studying her like she'd just said something fascinating. Are you telling me what to do, sweetheart? The endearment sounded like a threat. Mia's mouth went dry. I'm just asking. You don't tell me what to do. His voice was soft, conversational, but it carried the weight of absolute authority.
Ever.
Do we understand each other? Mia nodded quickly, her heart hammering. Good. Dante stood, his impressive height forcing her to crane her neck to meet his eyes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick roll of cash, peeling off several $100 bills and placing them on the table. Same time tomorrow, Mia. I'll be here. As he moved past her toward the door, he paused, his lips almost brushing her ear. Sweet dreams, he whispered. Then he was gone, leaving Mia standing alone beside a table covered in more money than she'd ever seen in one place. Around her, the cafe slowly returned to normal, conversations resumed, laughter echoed, the tension gradually faded. But Mia knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow he would return, and the day after that, and every day until he got whatever it was he wanted from her. She just prayed she'd survive long enough to find out what that was. 3 days. For 3 torturous days, Dante had kept his promise, appearing at the cafe every morning like clockwork. He'd sit at his corner table, order black coffee, and watch Mia with those predatory dark eyes while leaving obscene tips that made her feel more like a purchased possession than an employee. By Friday evening, Mia's nerves were frayed to the breaking point. She'd barely eaten, couldn't concentrate on anything, and jumped at every shadow. Her coworkers whispered about her constantly, and she'd caught Carol on the phone twice, probably talking to corporate about the situation. The situation being that the most dangerous man in the city had apparently decided her cafe was his new favorite hangout spot. Mia stayed late that night, hoping to avoid the usual rush hour crowd and the possibility of running into Dante somewhere outside the controlled environment of the cafe. She scrubbed tables that were already clean, reorganized supplies that didn't need organizing, anything to delay the inevitable walk to her apartment. Finally, at nearly 9 o'clock, Carol practically forced her out the door.
Go home, Mia.
You look like hell. The October air was crisp against her skin as she walked the 6 blocks to her building, a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that was trying desperately to gentrify itself. The streetlights cast long shadows between the buildings, and every footstep behind her made her pulse quicken. But she made it to her apartment building without incident. Relief flooded through her as she approached the familiar glass entrance, keys already in hand. That relief died the moment she saw them. 2 men in dark suits stood flanking her building's entrance, like sentries. They weren't particularly large, nothing like the mountain of muscle that usually surrounded Dante, but something in their stillness, their predatory alertness, made her blood turn to ice. Mia stopped dead on the sidewalk, her keys clattering to the ground. The taller one, a lean man with silver at his temples, smiled at her. It wasn't a friendly smile. Miss Mia Chin, he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. Mr. Russo would like a word. I don't. Mia's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. I don't want to talk to him. I'm afraid that's not really an option, the second man said. He was younger, with dead eyes that reminded her of a shark's. Mr. Russo doesn't like to be kept waiting. Before Mia could respond, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb with whisper-quiet precision. The rear window was tinted so dark she couldn't see inside, but she knew who was waiting in that expensive leather interior. "Please don't make this difficult," the older man said, stepping toward her. "We can do this easy or hard. Your choice." Mia looked around desperately. The street was empty except for a homeless man sleeping in a doorway 2 blocks down. No one to help. No one to even witness whatever was about to happen to her. "What if I scream?" The younger man's dead eyes seemed amused. "Then you scream. Doesn't change where you're going." With trembling legs, Mia allowed them to escort her to the car. The older man opened the rear door with mock courtesy, and she found herself sliding onto leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Dante sat in the corner, perfectly relaxed, wearing a black cashmere coat that made him look like a wealthy businessman rather than a killer. In the dim interior lighting, his features were sharper, more dangerous. He didn't look at her immediately, instead finishing something on his phone with the casual attention of a man who owned the world. "Hello, Mia." The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, and panic clawed at her throat. "Where are you taking me?" "Nowhere far. We just need to have a conversation, and your apartment doesn't seem private enough." Dante finally looked at her, and his dark eyes seemed to see straight through her. "You've been avoiding me." "I haven't been. You stayed late at work every night this week. Left through the back door yesterday. Asked your manager to switch your schedule." His voice was conversational, but each word hit her like a physical blow. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" The fact that he'd been watching her so closely made her stomach churn. "You're scaring me." "Good. Fear keeps people alive in my world." Dante shifted slightly, and suddenly he seemed to take up even more space in the luxurious interior. "But you don't need to be afraid, Mia. Not if you're smart. What do you want from me?" Instead of answering directly, Dante reached into his coat and pulled out a manila folder. He opened it casually, as if they were discussing the weather. Mia Chen, 24 years old. Lives alone at 1247 Warehouse District, apartment 3B. Works at Grind Coffee. Makes approximately $1,200 a month plus tips. He glanced up at her terrified face. "Should I continue?" Mia's throat felt like sandpaper. "How do you?" "Your mother, Linda Chen, lives in Portland. Remarried last year to a man named Robert Hayes. Works as a nurse at Providence Medical Center." Dante turned a page with deliberate slowness. "Your younger brother, Danny, is 16. Junior at Lincoln High School. Star player on the soccer team. Walks home alone every Tuesday and Thursday after practice." "Stop," the word came out as a whisper. "Your best friend Sarah Martinez lives 3 blocks from here. Single mother. Works 2 jobs to support her daughter Emma." Dante's voice remained perfectly calm, as if he were reading a grocery list. "Emma's in kindergarten at Riverside Elementary. Sweet little girl. Loves purple unicorns."
Please stop.
Dante closed the folder and set it aside, his dark eyes fixed on her face. "The world is full of threats, Mia. Bad things happen to good people every single day. Car accidents. Home invasions. Children who disappear walking home from school." He leaned forward slightly and she could smell his expensive cologne. "But you know what's interesting? Bad things rarely happen to people under my protection." Mia's hands were shaking so hard she had to clench them into fists. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have a choice to make." Dante's voice was soft, reasonable, terrifying in its calm certainty. "Stick with me, and everyone you care about stays safe. Your mother keeps her job. Danny keeps playing soccer. Little Emma keeps believing in purple unicorns." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "Say no." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "You're threatening my family." "I'm offering them protection." Dante's smile was sharp as a blade. "There's a difference. And if I refuse?" The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Then you'll regret it." "They'll regret it. And regret, Mia, is a luxury none of you can afford." The car had stopped moving, Mia realized. Through the tinted windows, she could see they were parked outside her building again. But everything had changed. Her safe little world, her quiet life, the people she loved, All of it was now held hostage by the man sitting across from her. "I need time to think," she whispered. "You have until tomorrow morning." Dante's hand moved to the door handle. "Same table, same time. Give me your answer then." The door opened, and cool air rushed into the car. Mia stumbled out onto the sidewalk, her legs barely supporting her weight. "Sweet dreams, Mia," Dante called softly as the car pulled away, leaving her alone on the empty street. But as she stood there shaking, clutching her keys with white knuckles, Mia knew one thing with terrible certainty. She wasn't choosing between freedom and captivity. She was choosing who lived and who died. And Dante Russo had just made sure there was only one choice she could make. Mia didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dante's cold smile and heard his voice promising consequences for the people she loved. By 3 a.m., she'd made her decision. She had to run. Not just from the city, from everything. Her life, her identity, her past. She'd disappear completely, become someone else, somewhere far away, where Dante Russo's reach couldn't find her. It was the only way to keep her family safe. Moving quietly through her small apartment, Mia packed only essentials, a change of clothes, her savings, $8.47 in crumpled bills hidden in a coffee tin, and her grandmother's wedding ring, the only thing of value she owned. Everything else would have to stay behind, evidence of a life she was abandoning. She left a note for her landlord, claiming a family emergency, and another for Carol at the cafe. Nothing that would raise immediate suspicions, but enough to buy her a few days' head start. The pre-dawn darkness felt like a friend as Mia slipped out of her building through the basement exit, avoiding the main entrance where Dante's men might be watching. She'd planned this carefully, a route through back alleys and side streets that would take her to the Greyhound station downtown. Once there, she'd buy a ticket to anywhere. Maybe Phoenix. Maybe Atlanta. Somewhere warm and anonymous, where she could start over as someone new. For the first time in days, hope flickered in her chest. She could do this. She could disappear. The bus station was busier than she'd expected for 5 a.m., shift workers heading to early jobs, a few tourists with heavy backpacks, and the usual collection of people who had nowhere else to go. Mia kept her head down, pulling her baseball cap low over her eyes as she approached the ticket window. "Next bus out of the city," she told the board clerk. "Doesn't matter where. Phoenix leaves in 20 minutes. $89. Mia counted out the bills with shaking hands, her heart racing with each second that passed. Almost there. Almost free. The clerk handed her the ticket, and she turned toward the waiting area, only to freeze as her blood turned to ice. Dante's men were there. Not just the two from last night, but 4 of them, positioned strategically around the terminal like they owned the place. The older man with silver hair stood near the Phoenix gate, his eyes scanning the crowd with professional efficiency. The younger one with dead eyes lurked by the restrooms, blocking her escape route to the back exit.
No.
No, no, no. Mia spun around, looking for another way out, but her movement caught their attention. The man by the restroom straightened, his hand moving to his jacket, and she knew her time was up. "Going somewhere?" The voice came from directly behind her. Deep, amused, terrifyingly familiar. Mia turned slowly, her legs feeling like water. Dante stood there in an expensive black coat, his dark hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. He looked like he'd been expecting her, like this was all part of some elaborate game he was winning. "How did you know you'd run?" Dante's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because running is what scared little girls do. And you, Mia, are very scared." Around them, the normal sounds of the bus station continued, announcements over crackling speakers, the hiss of air brakes, conversations in multiple languages. But Mia felt like she was trapped in a bubble with this dangerous man, cut off from the safety of the ordinary world. "I won't go with you," she whispered. "Yes, you will." Dante stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Because you're smart enough to know what happens if you don't." Mia looked around desperately. The security guard was on the other side of the terminal, completely oblivious. Other passengers moved past them without a second glance, assuming this was just a lover's quarrel or a domestic dispute, nothing that concerned them. "Help!" she screamed suddenly, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "Help me!" A few people turned to stare, but Dante didn't even flinch. Instead, he moved with lightning speed, his arms sliding around her waist like they were embracing, his mouth close to her ear. "Scream all you want," he murmured, his voice deadly calm. "But look around, sweetheart. See anyone coming to rescue you?" He was right. The security guard had glanced their way, but wasn't moving. Other passengers were already turning back to their own business, their brief curiosity satisfied. In a place like this, people minded their own business. "You can run from anyone but me," Dante continued, his grip tightening as she struggled. "The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." Mia fought harder, trying to break free, trying to create enough of a scene that someone would intervene. But Dante was too strong, too controlled. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her toward the exit like she weighed nothing, his men forming a protective circle around them. "Let me go," she shouted, beating her fists against his chest. "Someone help me." But her cries fell on deaf ears. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple having a dramatic reconciliation. The kind of scene people pretended not to see. The black sedan was waiting outside, engine running. Dante slid into the back seat with her still in his arms, and the door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. "Drive," he commanded the man behind the wheel. As the car pulled away from the station, Mia's escape route and her last hope disappeared behind tinted windows. The city flowed past in a blur of early morning light, taking her farther from everything familiar, everything safe. 20 minutes later, they passed through ornate iron gates that closed behind them with electronic precision. The mansion that emerged from behind towering oak trees was breathtaking, 3 stories of pale stone and soaring windows, surrounded by manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people made in a year. It was beautiful. It was luxurious. It was a prison. Men in dark suits stood at attention along the circular driveway. Security cameras tracked their movement with mechanical precision. High walls topped with decorative iron spikes surrounded the entire property like elegant cage bars. The car stopped in front of marble steps leading to massive wooden doors. Dante released her, but his hand immediately caught her wrist as she tried to bolt. "Welcome home," he said softly. "This isn't my home." Mia jerked against his grip, but his fingers were like steel bands. "You can't keep me here." Dante stepped out of the car and pulled her with him, his movements unhurried despite her struggles. At the top of the steps, he paused and turned to face her, his dark eyes capturing hers with hypnotic intensity. "You belong to me now, Mia," he said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "This is where you live. This is where you stay. This is where you learn to be mine." The massive doors opened as if by magic, revealing a marble foyer that looked like something from a palace. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across polished floors, and a sweeping staircase curved toward the upper floors like something from a fairy tale. A beautiful cage for a captive bird. As Dante led her inside, Mia realized with crushing finality that her old life was over. She belonged to Dante Russo now, and he had no intention of ever letting her go. Mia had been Dante's prisoner for 2 weeks, trapped in luxury that felt more suffocating than any jail cell. The mansion was beautiful, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, rooms filled with priceless art, but beauty couldn't mask the fact that she was a captive bird in a gilded cage. She'd tested every exit, tried every window, pleaded with every member of Dante's staff. Nothing worked. The property was a fortress, designed to keep threats out and secrets in. And now, apparently, to keep her. Dante visited her every evening, bringing dinner and attempting conversation like they were old friends rather than captor and captive. She'd refused to speak to him for the first week, but isolation was a weapon too, and eventually she'd started responding just to hear another human voice. Tonight felt different, though. There was tension crackling through the mansion like electricity before a storm. She'd noticed it in the increased security patrols, the way the staff avoided eye contact, the hushed phone conversations in languages she didn't understand. Mia was reading in the library, one of the few activities Dante allowed her, when the first explosion shattered the peaceful evening. The windows rattled in their frames. Books tumbled from shelves. The crystal chandelier above her head swayed ominously, sending rainbow light dancing across the walls like a warning. Before she could process what was happening, the second explosion hit, closer this time. The lights went out, plunging the mansion into darkness broken only by emergency lighting that cast everything in hellish red. Gunfire erupted outside, not the single shots of hunting rifles, but the rapid-fire staccato of automatic weapons. Screams echoed through the halls, and she could hear running footsteps, shouted orders, the crash of breaking glass. Mia pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering as chaos erupted around her. This was Dante's world, the world of violence and blood that existed beneath his expensive suits and charming smiles. She'd known about it intellectually, but experiencing it was something else entirely. The library door burst open, and she nearly screamed before recognizing Dante's silhouette in the red emergency lighting. But this wasn't the controlled, elegant man she'd come to know. His perfect hair was disheveled, his white shirt torn and stained with something dark. Most terrifying of all, he held a gun, a sleek black pistol that looked like an extension of his hand. "Mia," his voice cut through the chaos. "Get away from the windows." She stumbled toward him, and he caught her arm, pulling her against his chest. She could feel his heart racing, smell gunpowder, and something metallic, blood. "Who's attacking us?" she gasped. "The Morettas." Dante's jaw was tight with fury. "They think they can waltz into my home, and—" Another explosion rocked the mansion, much closer now. The sound of splintering would told her the front entrance had been breached. "This way," Dante ordered, dragging her toward a section of bookshelf that swung open to reveal a hidden passage. "Stay behind me. Don't let go of my hand." They plunged into darkness, Dante leading her through narrow corridors she'd never known existed. Behind them, she could hear the battle raging, shouts in Italian, the crash of furniture being overturned, more gunfire. "Why?" she whispered as they moved through the secret passages. "Why are they doing this?" Dante's grip on her hand tightened. "Because they're stupid enough to think they can take what's mine." They emerged into what looked like a safe room, concrete walls lined with monitors showing security footage from around the property. The screens revealed a war zone. Men in dark clothing had breached the gates and were fighting Dante's security forces across the grounds. Muzzle flashes lit up the gardens like deadly fireworks. "Stay here," Dante commanded, settling her into a chair. "Don't move. Don't touch anything." "Where are you going?" His smile was sharp and terrible. To remind the Morettas why they should fear the Russo name. Before she could protest, he was gone, disappearing back into the hidden passages. Mia was left alone with the monitors, watching the battle unfold around her prison palace. She watched Dante emerge onto the main floor, moving through his own home like a predator hunting prey. He wasn't the elegant businessman anymore. He was something primal and deadly, firing his weapon with precision that spoke of years of practice. Men fell before him, and those who didn't scattered like roaches when the lights came on. 20 minutes later, the gunfire stopped. The explosions ceased. An eerie quiet settled over the mansion, broken only by distant sirens that would arrive too late to matter. Dante returned, his white shirt now completely ruined, a cut across his left cheek that he seemed not to notice. But his dark eyes burned with uncontrolled fury. "Is it over?" Mia asked. Instead of answering, he activated an intercom system. "Conference room.
Now."
All department heads. Within minutes, she could hear voices through the speakers, his lieutenants gathering for an emergency meeting. 6 dead on our side, someone reported. 12 wounded. The Morettas lost at least 15, but the rest escaped. Property damage is extensive, but reparable. Another voice added. They came hard and fast, boss. This was planned. Dante's voice, when he spoke, was deadly calm. They came for her. Silence fell over the room. This wasn't about territory or business, Dante continued, his fury barely leashed. They knew exactly where to find her. They knew about the library, about her routines. Someone told them. Mia's blood ran cold. They'd come for her specifically. We have a leak, one of his men said grimly. Find it, Dante ordered. Find it and plug it permanently. But first, his voice dropped to something that made Mia shiver. The Morettas think they can touch what's mine? They think they can threaten her? Burn them all. Sir, you heard me. Every business, every safe house, every asset they have. I want them to understand that coming after Mia Chun was the last mistake they'll ever make. Mia sank into her chair, the full reality hitting her like a physical blow. This war, this violence, the blood being spilled, it was all about her. Dante's obsession had painted a target on her back, and now people were dying because of it. She'd known he was dangerous. She'd known he was possessive. But she hadn't understood until now that his love was a weapon pointed at anyone who dared threaten what he considered his. The war for Mia Chun had officially begun. And Dante Russo intended to win it, no matter how many bodies it took. The days following the attack were eerily quiet. Dante had tripled security, and the mansion felt more like a military compound than a home. Mia barely saw him, just glimpses through her window as he paced the gardens while talking on his phone, orchestrating what she could only assume was his war against the Moretti family. She'd heard the whisper reports from staff. 3 Moretti businesses burned to the ground, 2 of their associates found floating in the harbor, and their eldest son hospitalized after what the news called a random mugging.
Right.
The guilt was eating her alive. On the 4th night after the attack, Mia couldn't take the isolation anymore. She left her room, her beautiful prison, and wandered the halls, half hoping to encounter one of Dante's guards who would escort her back. At least that would be human contact. Instead, she found herself outside Dante's study, drawn by the soft amber light spilling from beneath the door. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What was she doing? Seeking comfort from her captor. Before she could decide, the door opened. Dante stood there in the doorway, no longer the perfectly groomed businessman or the deadly warrior she'd witnessed during the attack. His shirt was wrinkled and partially unbuttoned, his hair disheveled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked exhausted, and somehow more human than she'd ever seen him. Can't sleep either? He asked quietly. Mia shook her head, suddenly feeling foolish for seeking him out. Come in, he stepped aside, gesturing toward his study. The room was masculine and elegant, dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, a massive desk that probably cost more than most cars. But what caught her attention was the half-empty bottle of whiskey on the side table and the glass in Dante's hand. Want some? He held up the bottle. It helps with the nightmares. You have nightmares? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she'd asked. Every night for the past 20 years. Mia accepted the glass he poured for her, the amber liquid burning her throat but warming her chest. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. I'm sorry, she said finally. Dante's dark eyes found hers. For what? For people dying because of me. For this war you're fighting. If I hadn't spilled that coffee. Don't, his voice was sharp, cutting her off. Don't apologize for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what saved you. Saved me from what? Dante took a long sip of whiskey, his gaze distant. From disappearing into a life that would have slowly killed everything beautiful about you. The words hung in the air, raw and unexpected. Mia studied his profile, seeing something vulnerable beneath the dangerous exterior. Tell me about the nightmares, she said softly. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low and steady. I was 8 when I watched my father torture a man to death in our basement. The man had stolen from us $50,000. Not much, really, but my father said it was about respect. Dante's grip tightened on his glass. He made me watch. Said it was my education. Mia's breath caught, but she didn't speak. I was 10 when my uncle tried to have my father killed. Family dinner, Sunday night. Four gunmen came through the windows during dessert. My mother died shielding me. His voice never changed tone, but she could see the tension in his jaw. My father killed my uncle with his bare hands 2 days later. I watched that too. Jesus, Mia whispered. I was 15 when I realized I'd never be able to trust anyone. My best friend, closest thing I had to a brother, he sold information about our security to the Colombians. Cost us 12 good men and nearly got me killed. Dante finally looked at her, his dark eyes holding decades of pain. That's when I learned that caring about people makes you weak. Love is a weapon your enemies will use against you. Then why me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Why risk caring about me? Dante was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Do you know what it's like to live your entire life waiting for the next betrayal? To smile at people while calculating how they might try to kill you? To never, not once, let your guard down because the moment you do, you're dead? Mia shook her head. 27 years. That's how long I lived like that. And then he smiled, but it was different from his usual predatory expression. This one was almost tender. You spilled coffee on me, Mia. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't afraid of me. You weren't trying to impress me or use me or kill me. You were just real. I was terrified, she protested. After you learned who I was. But in that first moment, when you looked up at me with those wide eyes, you were just a girl who'd made a mistake. You've apologized. You offered to pay for my suit even though we both knew you couldn't afford it. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. And for the first time in my life, I felt alive. Mia felt her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. This wasn't the monster who'd kidnapped her, or the killer who'd declared war on the Moretus. This was a man who'd been broken so young and so thoroughly that he'd forgotten how to be human. You can't love someone you've kidnapped, she said, but the words lacked conviction. Can't I? Dante set down his glass and moved closer, but slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal. You think this is about possession, but you're wrong. This is about finding something precious in a world that's tried to kill everything good in me. I'm not some angel, Dante. I'm just a waitress. You're everything I never knew I needed. His hand reached out, barely touching her cheek. And I know you feel it too. The connection. The way your pulse quickens when I'm near. It's not just fear anymore. She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. Somewhere between the terror and the guilt, something else had taken root. Understanding. Compassion. And something more dangerous than either. This is crazy, she whispered. The best things usually are. In the amber lamplight, with his defenses finally down, Dante looked younger somehow. Still dangerous, still deadly, but human in a way that made her heart ache. For the first time since he'd taken her, Mia began to understand why she might choose to stay. The mistake was thinking she was safe in the garden. After their conversation in his study 3 nights ago, Dante had been different, more open, less controlling. He'd started allowing Mia small freedoms, walks in the gardens, meals on the terrace, even access to his private library without supervision. It felt like progress, like maybe they were finding some kind of understanding. That progress made her complacent. Mia was reading beneath the ancient oak tree, enjoying the late afternoon sunshine, when she heard footsteps on the gravel path. She looked up expecting to see one of Dante's guards, but instead found herself staring at 3 men in dark clothing she didn't recognize. Miss Chin, the leader said with a smile that made her blood freeze. He was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. You're coming with us. Mia dropped her book and ran. She made it maybe 20 yards before strong hands caught her arms, lifting her off her feet despite her struggles. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, soaked with something sweet and chemical that made her vision blur. "Sleep tight, princess," one of them whispered as darkness claimed her. "You're the key to bringing down Dante Russo." When consciousness returned, Mia found herself in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Concrete floors, rusted metal beams, and the smell of decay and motor oil. Her wrists were zip-tied to a metal chair, but otherwise she appeared unharmed. "Awake already?" The silver-haired man sat across from her, cleaning his fingernails with a switchblade. "You're tougher than you look. Who are you?" Mia's voice was hoarse, her throat burning from whatever they'd used to knock her out. "Marco Moretti. I believe you're familiar with my family's recent difficulties." The name hit her like a physical blow. These were the people Dante had been hunting, the ones whose businesses he'd burned, whose associates had ended up in the harbor. And now they had her. "What do you want?" "Simple. Your boyfriend values you more than his empire. We're going to test that theory." Marco's smile was sharp as his blade. "He has until midnight to surrender everything. His territory, his operations, his men. All of it. Or we start sending him pieces of you." Terror clawed at Mia's throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. Dante had taught her something in these past weeks, though she'd only just realized it. How to be strong when everything was falling apart. "He won't surrender," she said quietly. "No? Even for his precious little bird. You don't understand him. He doesn't negotiate with people who threaten what's his. He destroys them." Marco's smile faltered slightly. Big words for a girl tied to a chair. "Not big words. Just truth." Mia met his eyes steadily. "You've made a mistake. Dante doesn't trade. He takes." Hours passed. The Morettis made their calls, issued their ultimatums, waited for Dante's surrender. They sent photos of Mia bound and bloodied. They'd hit her when she refused to beg into their camera, along with their demands. But Mia knew Dante wouldn't give them what they wanted. He'd come for her instead. She just had to survive long enough. When one of the guards got too close, she drove her elbow into his solar plexus with every ounce of strength she had. When Marco tried to intimidate her with his knife, she spat in his face and called him a coward. When they threatened to cut off her fingers, she laughed and told them they'd better kill her quickly because Dante was coming. And he was. The first explosion took out the warehouse's main entrance at exactly 11:47 p.m. The second explosion came from the opposite side, creating chaos and confusion among the Morettis. Automatic gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Dante had brought an army. Marco's men scattered like rats, some trying to fight, others trying to flee. It didn't matter. In the muzzle flashes and emergency lighting, Mia caught glimpses of Dante moving through the warehouse like death incarnate. He wasn't just shooting, he was hunting, methodical and merciless. When Marco pressed his knife to Mia's throat, using her as a human shield, Dante appeared out of the shadows 20 feet away. His gun was trained on Marco's head, his dark eyes burning with fury that made him look like an avenging angel. "Let her go," Dante said, his voice deadly calm despite the carnage around them. "Drop your weapon or I cut her throat." Marco's voice cracked with desperation. Dante tilted his head, considering. Then he smiled, that sharp, predatory expression that Mia had learned to fear and, somehow, love. "Do you know what your mistake was, Marco? Shut up and drop the..." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Marco's body dropped like a marionette with cut strings, a perfect hole between his eyes. Dante had fired without hesitation, without fear of hitting Mia. He trusted his own skill completely. Within minutes, the warehouse was silent except for the distant sirens that would arrive too late to matter. Dante cut through Mia's restraints with efficient movements, his hands checking her for serious injuries. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, with suppressed emotion. "I'm okay," she whispered, though she was shaking like a leaf. "I knew you'd come." Dante pulled her against his chest, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She could feel him trembling too, his perfect control finally cracking. "You're mine, Mia," he said fiercely, his lips against her hair. From the day you spilled that coffee, you've always been mine. And I swear on my father's grave, no one will ever take you from me again. As sirens wailed in the distance and smoke curled through the ruined warehouse, Mia realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in Dante, but in herself. She wasn't his victim anymore. She was his partner. And she was ready to choose him. Back at the mansion, Mia stood in the marble bathroom, staring at her reflection in the ornate mirror. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, bruises on her cheek from the Morettus, fire in her eyes that hadn't been there a month ago, and a set to her shoulders that spoke of strength earned through surviving hell. She'd changed. The scared waitress who'd spilled coffee on a dangerous stranger was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who'd faced down killers and refused to break. The question was, what did she want to do about it? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mia? Dante's voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. May I come in? She opened the door to find him leaning against the frame, still wearing his blood-splattered shirt from the warehouse. He looked exhausted but relieved, his dark eyes searching her face like he was memorizing every detail. I need to ask you something, she said before he could speak. Dante nodded, waiting. If I wanted to leave, really leave, disappear forever, would you let me go? The question hung between them like a blade. For a long moment, Dante was silent, his jaw working as he considered his answer. Yes, he said finally, and she could hear the pain it cost him. If that's what you truly wanted, I'd let you go. I'd make sure you had money, protection, a new identity. You'd be safe. But I'd spend the rest of my life hoping you'd change your mind. The honesty in his voice nearly broke her heart. Here was the most powerful man in the city, capable of commanding armies and destroying empires, reduced to hoping for the love of a woman who'd been his prisoner. And if I stayed? She asked quietly. Dante stepped closer, his hand reaching up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. If you stayed, you'd never be my captive again. You'd be my partner, my equal, my queen. What does that mean exactly? It means you'd sit beside me when I make decisions that affect thousands of people. It means you'd have power that most women can only dream of. It means you'd be protected and cherished and feared, his thumb brushed across her cheek. But it also means you'd be part of this world. The violence, the danger, the choices that keep us alive but cost us pieces of our souls. Mia closed her eyes, weighing her options. She could run. Start over somewhere warm and anonymous. Find a normal life with a normal man who worked a normal job and never had blood on his hands. Or she could stay. Embrace the darkness she discovered in herself. Stand beside a man who'd torn down empires for her. Rule a kingdom built on fear and respect and deadly love. When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. I want to see your world, she said. All of it. 3 hours later, Mia found herself in a situation she never could have imagined, sitting at a mahogany conference table surrounded by some of the most dangerous men in the city. Dante had chosen her outfit, a black dress that was elegant but unmistakably powerful, paired with jewelry that probably cost more than most people's houses. She looked like money, like power, like someone who belonged in this room of killers and kingpins. The men around the table, Dante's lieutenants, his captains, his most trusted advisors, stared at her with barely concealed shock. Women didn't attend these meetings. Women weren't part of the inner circle. Women certainly didn't sit at Dante's right hand like equals. Gentlemen, Dante said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power, I believe some of you have met Mia, but allow me to make formal introductions. The room fell silent, tension crackling like electricity. This is Mia Chen, Dante continued, his hand finding hers on the table and gripping it firmly. My woman, my partner. His dark eyes swept the room, daring anyone to object. My queen. The silence stretched until Vincent Torino, Dante's oldest lieutenant, cleared his throat. Boss, with all due respect. She saved my life tonight. Dante cut him off. While the Morettis were torturing her for information, she gave them nothing. When they threatened to cut off her fingers if I didn't surrender, she laughed in their faces. His grip on Mia's hand tightened. She's earned her place at this table. Mia felt the weight of their stares, the calculation behind their eyes. These men were wondering if she was a weakness they could exploit or a new power they needed to respect. Time to show them. The Moretti problem is finished, she said, her voice steady and clear. But their allies will be watching to see how we respond. They'll test us, looking for signs of weakness. She met each man's eyes in turn. I suggest we give them something else to think about. Such as? Vincent asked, his tone carefully neutral. Mia smiled, and it was sharp as her lover's, deadly as his promise. We take everything they have. Their territory, their operations, their people. We don't just win this war, we erase them from the game entirely. The men around the table exchanged glances, and she could see the moment they stopped seeing her as Dante's weakness and started seeing her as something else entirely, a true partner in power. I like her, Vincent said finally, a grin spreading across his scarred face. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Under the table, Dante's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a private gesture of pride and love that sent warmth through her entire body. Any other business? Dante asked the room. As the meeting continued, Mia felt something settle into place inside her chest. This was her choice. Her world now. Her empire to help rule. She'd spilled coffee on a stranger and found her destiny. The scared waitress was dead. Long live the queen.